Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. I'm back out on the beat here after Valentine's Day. We had such an incredible crab cake row, a couple Super Bowl. We did our 5 days. We did 40 hours of charity conversations. You've been hearing them. All of them great causes, lots of tear jerkers. The rooms got dusty last week, but I've been putting it all out of Baltimore Positive, all out on the radio, WNST and AM 1570. Hope you're setting a spot on your dial. Even if we're number 6 or number 12, but put us on the first panel at least so you find us. No, nobody's listening to the Bay anymore. They're playing too much Chili Pepper. So put us on 1570. Tell them I said that. Get Brillhart angry with me. It's fine. And I haven't listened to 98 Rock in a while. But I tell you what, I went up to Harrisburg. I passed Luke Jones's house to see the great Tommy Conwell and Harris. You guys got good rock and roll stations up there at York and up in Harrisburg. I mean, sometimes I can get them down here in Towson, but it's been a little while, you and me. I mean, I guess when we got together, Bradish was still in the rotation, and there wasn't that. I think the last time we got together, Ortiz had just gone to the Chargers, but certainly the last time we got together, and this is getting to be worse and worse because, like, I found some old tape of me and Brooks Robinson the other day, and then I realized he's no longer with us. And then a friend is writing a book on Tom Matte, and I feel like I'm going to run into Tom over a crab cake sometime soon. Man, we're losing legends. And the Lefty Driesell thing, before we get to football, I want to give you a little oxygen on this because I don't know, man. Guys get to be in their 90s. I've lost my mother. You know what I mean? Like, it's Bruce Springsteen lost his mom a couple weeks ago. Like, but still, Lefty was Lefty,
Yeah.
man. I mean, everything about Maryland basketball you ever loved really had to do with Lefty.
Yeah, I mean, even someone like me, where Lefty was before my time. I was born in '83, so that was as the Lefty era was starting to wind down. But I think Gary Williams said it best in some of his comments over the weekend. I mean, you think about what Maryland ultimately became, and obviously the climax then was, of course, '02 and winning the national championship. But Lefty put the Terps on the map. I mean, you look at what Maryland was in the ACC from a basketball perspective for decades wasn't much. I mean, it really wasn't until Lefty arrived and famously proclaimed he was going to make make Maryland the UCLA of the East. And now UCLA is going to be in the same conference as Maryland, which just speaks to how crazy things have changed on the college sports scene. But I mean, how can you not view it through a very fond lens as far as what he meant? And by most accounts, I don't think I ever met Lefty. I think interviewed him once or twice so over the phone. But I mean, just so important for Maryland and the history of the Terps and all of that. And of course, they had planned to recognize him a few weeks back, and obviously wasn't well enough to attend. So you could kind of sense that maybe the end was approaching. I mean,
I pulled this out. I want to promote this because Tom McMillan's been a friend of mine from the beginning. So
mhm.
Len Elmore and Tom McMillan are two men that I have known for 35 years. Before I was Nasty Nestor, even on the radio, just Len Elmore, just such good men, good people, like all these years in. And Tom comes on, and whenever I ask, he'll come on, sure, I'll come have a crab cake with you or whatever. And you're always like, you're so tall, dude. You're just such a big man, and the suspenders and all that. But Tom came on a couple of years ago with Don Moeller and I, and they were honoring Lefty for his birthday. They were kind of like doing a little roast and doing a thing with him for his 90th birthday. And I got such great stories out of Tom. So I replatformed it. I put it out Baltimore Positive. You can find it on our social media thread too. If you want to go listen to some great stories, my stories are all just being a kid and loving the team, right? And I know you were with me when George Shulen was around, and I told you about the Toyota book back in 79, 80, and 81, the ACC handbook, when there were still 8 teams, and Larry Nance and Lee Raker and Jeff Lamp and Terry Holland, and everything that the ACC tournament represented at that point, and going to the Capitol Center and seeing Muggsy and falling for that Wake Forest cheerleader. But that was a long time ago. It was back in the 80s. And I just want to say this, and we'll get on to football, because I took a picture with Lefty in the streets of Indianapolis. It was the week that I became nationally syndicated and Nasty Nationwide. So it was it was March Madness weekend of 1999 and or 2000, whatever year it was in. You can look it up, Indianapolis. And I'm walking down the street right in front of the new basketball arena there. I call it new. It's the field house that's there. That's built for basketball. It's a beautiful basketball facility. Um, and I Lefty was on the street, and I'm just walking, and there's Lefty, and there's me, and I'm like, so I took a picture with Lefty. Could have been, and he had done the show plenty of time. Oh,
Mhm.
you'll Nesta. Ah, yeah, yeah. And nobody did a better Lefty than me in the '90s. Well, I know, hell, I don't know. Lucas, Lucas Jones got a good left hand out of Shrewsbury. Could play a tougher competition up there. But yeah, I mean, I loved Lefty. So, but
Mhm.
I never did business with Lefty. He never came to the barn and sat down. He was always like at Georgia State. He was gone. Like my friend um and Greg Abel, and if you're friends with Greg, he owns a local PR firm. He's actually the guy that did the "We're Not Going to Take It" video when I did Free the Birds. He wrote a beautiful piece about going to JMU right when Lefty went there, and he
Mhm.
had sort of turned that program around. They got into the tournament and all that. And then he went to Georgia State, but like he was only emeritus Maryland. He never hung out in Baltimore. He was, you know what I mean? So you didn't run into him much because he coached until he was 80 or whatever. I mean, he loved ball. And yeah, so like to have a picture with him meant something to me because we weren't in the same room all that much, although he felt like my uncle, right? Like literally felt like my
Mhm.
uncle, but we weren't. And dude, to bring it full circle, and I do want to get some football in here with you, but you mentioned your birth in October of '83 and like how it correlates with the Orioles and where people would be in their lives at that point. I was born in October '68 and I started at the newspaper in January of '84. So it's 40 years ago last month that I started the paper. I was there 2 years. And my big break in life was getting my job at the Evening Sun, Jack Gibbons and Mike Marlowe and Bob Nussgart. And I've talked about all that stuff, but that was in January 6th of '86, right? Len Bias died 5 months later.
Mhm.
I was on duty that morning, you know, so and it was early in the morning. I did the overnight shift, and like everything about Lefty changed, on June 19th, 1986, right?
Right.
And like that's so long. It was 38 years ago. Like Lefty was never the same after that. And we can honor Lefty and put him in the Hall of Fame and love him up and like all of that. But like his reputation and legacy and everything about Maryland at that moment,
Yeah.
it changed. Like everything about it changed when Len Bias died. And it's man, you when you draw it up and see it was 40 years ago since he was really there's a period of time he wasn't welcomed at Maryland and the books came out and like all of that happened in the late 80s and then Bob Wade and no lights, no camera, no action. I mean, say for Gary and I'll get the Wiz on at some point. I'll get Walt on because I love Walt. Walt's one of the great guys. Um, Maryland's done some good things. I mean, I
Yeah.
can poop on Maryland and stuff and Gary and whatever and personalities, but like the people that I've gotten to know from Maryland when I start talking about good people, Walt's one of those guys. And the whole thing got sanitized by Gary, by the rivalry with Duke and Carolina being something, at least something here for local people. But I just want to say this. The other night they played on Valentine's night, and I saw a picture that got circulated about how few people were there.
Yeah.
And I was like, and this is before Lefty died. Lefty died after that. So right, like Lefty died on like Saturday, right? And this was like Wednesday, Thursday, and I saw that picture. You and I don't go. We can talk very frankly. If you and I want to have a shoot interview while you're wearing your wrestling stuff there about how they treat us like garbage and have treated me like garbage for 30 years, that I don't go down there anymore. And I like basketball. I like the vibe. I like the girls. I like the wall. I even can deal with the profanity and like the crassness of the Maryland fan base. But you know, it's a tattered legacy in so many ways as to where they are now with a team that's not very good right now, with a coach that's trying to figure it out, everybody in the college sports trying to figure it out, including the fans. And
Sure.
that's where I would leave it is to say they played the other night and nobody was there. In the middle of they played a conference game on a decent weather night. Nobody was there. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder where it's going. I mean, that's what I wonder about when I think about basketball, because I know where Lefty wanted it to go and where Gary drove it. Yeah, I don't know where it is right now. I really don't. And
Yeah.
when I think about Lefty and I think about that Toyota guide back in 78 and 79 and those players and James Worthy and Michael Jordan and ACC champion, like all of that, the real March Madness with Bird and Magic. And I don't know where the sport is. And that's because I'm wayward. I'm wayward with college basketball. Just I am.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to leave it. But where Maryland is now, where people Lefty is the one who had the original vision of Maryland reaching those kind of heights, where it had not in the sport of college basketball. But Gary got them there. And Juan Dixon and Lonnie Baxter and Chris Wilcox go down the list of those guys in '02. And ever since,
Don't mention that team without mentioning Mouton. Stop that.
I love Byron Mouton.
All right, come on, man.
And Taj Holden. I mean, we'll go down the list, right?
I'm not going to let you mention the '79 Orioles or '83 without Renicky. I'm just not going to let you do that.
But just but because you mentioned it, and I think this is a good place to leave off for those who are frustrated with where they are right now. I mean, Jahmir Young, and that's about it, right? I mean, they're just not good enough this year. I mean, it's the first time you and I have even talked about this season, even in passing. But for anyone who wants it to be great again, it started with the vision that Lefty had when he arrived in the late 60s into the early 70s, as far as building that kind of program at Maryland. Will it reach the heights that it reached 20 years ago again? We'll see. Again, to your point, the sport has changed so much with NIL, the transfer portal, all that. Kevin Willard's trying to figure that out right now. And he's got a lot of work to do because this year has not been very good. But that started with the vision that Lefty Driesell had, five plus decades ago, and we'll see what happens here in the near future. But he'll certainly be missed, no question about it.
Luke Jones is here. We're gonna do some football. We're just kind of doing a wrap piece, beginning the week. Somebody bitched. And I thought all these Oriole fanboys wind up on our Twitter, and it's kind of, I see what people write and stuff like that. And somebody's like, this is the worst time of year. March Madness, the Turks are good. I don't like lacrosse, and wrestling's the WrestleMania. Like, this is like, it is exhale time. And I said to my wife, I'm here busting my ass working, doing all sorts of stuff. We have record traffic here at Baltimore Positive. If you're the one listening, you're not the only one. Surprise, surprise. But like just all sorts of things going on with the crab cake row and me like getting ready for this groundswell of change with baseball ownership and what it's going to mean. Not just for me, whether I get a press pass, because I'm concerned about that. And I'm thinking like I hadn't thought about like that, but whether the community's going to come back. And we mentioned the Terps and the football thing has always been so front and center. If Eric DaCosta ever wonders when he gets that Dear Eric letter that I write him about how close we were and how close I was with all the scouts, and this was the time of the year where I was the only one that cared. I was the one that went to Indianapolis. I was the one that combined. I was the one that got Sporting News books and subscribed to Mel Kiper and called Mel on the side and like talked to him about what he knew and bled every scout that I could and every Billick and Kevin Byrne and everybody to know what was going on because there was no baseball, right? Like, I mean, we're talking about from like 98 through 11, there was nothing. And the Ravens owned this place 20 years ago. And it didn't matter how they were picking or where they were picking. You thought they can pick an Ed Reed, they could pick a Terrell Suggs, they could pick a Kyle Bowler or a Travis Taylor or, whatever they're going to do. But it was the only thing we talked about. And I don't know, on the back end of the AFC Championship game and all the Lamarathon last year with the I mean, it was every day with the money and is he going to sign and like all that. I don't know that football is going to have that pace here over the next 90 days. And maybe that speaks to you and I having a little parting of the ways for a couple days. And I'm crab cake rowing and it's Valentine's Day and we're not really talking college basketball. But the baseball thing is foremost in your mind and the minds of everybody that I run into when I'm out. I mean, I did 40 hours in front of people. People weren't coming up to me asking, is Lamar good enough? Did they lost some coaches? It's all, Corbin Burns, and it's all Oriole ownership, Rubenstein or Rubenstein. It's like the Masson or no Masson. How do I get my games? And I don't know that people are banging on them to buy season tickets or whatever, the Orange Pass or get opening day or whatever. But we're talking baseball so much that the football, and this was different in 12 and 14 and 16 because Joe Flacco, Ray Lewis, They were winning Super Bowls even when the baseball team was sort of clawing at a wild card and Buck was trying to buckle us up and all of that. This is a incredible time because it may be the first time ever where the football team's going to like sit in the back seat for a little while. And that's just because they don't play. I mean, and because they're not going to splash anything. I don't, I mean, unless something awful happens, but they're not going to splash anything that's going to make us say, oh, we might win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think it's important to always have the proper lens here. It's always relevant considering the NFL is king, not just in Baltimore, but anywhere where there's an NFL team. I mean, the ratings for the Super Bowl reflect that every year, right? We know that. But that said, relatively speaking, compared to years past, sure, I think there's something to that. I think there's we talked about this when the season ended and obviously ended in such great disappointment, but there is very much a sense of, okay, what's next? What do you have to do? What gets you over the hump? And when you have a year like they just had, a regular season specifically like they just had, where I mean, it was, I think a lot of people very much felt and probably still feel that was the best regular season team in franchise history. Now, record wise, 19 was a little bit better. You can talk about 2006, they were 13-3 that year, but you know, we always say legacies are defined in January, and that's where the Ravens are. That's where Lamar Jackson is. That's where they all are. John Harbaugh included, you know, as he's now 12 years removed from having led the Ravens to a Super Bowl in his 5th year as head coach. But there is a sense of what's next. And, you know, you do get that lull in the offseason. Again, lull, I use that loosely because it's not like other sports where it goes away entirely. The NFL never truly goes away. But at least until, you know, the combine's coming up here, we're a little less than a month away from the start of free agency. But for the Ravens, there very much is this sense of, can you avoid having too much attrition? You know, we've already seen this with Mike Macdonald walking out the door and Anthony Weaver and some of the other Denard Wilson, some of the other assistant head coaches who've gotten promotions elsewhere. We are going to see it. And, you know, this first deadline that's actually this week, you know, with the 19th, that Monday, as far as the void year contracts that they had to do last year, right? They did it with Kevin Zeitler. They did it with Gus Edwards. They did it with Nelson Aguilar. They did it with Beckham, although they redid his deal a little bit to kind of kick that can down the road. But, you know, we'll see what happens there. Rock Ya-Sin, Geno Stone. Monday, the 19th, is kind of the deadline in terms of if you want to re-sign any of those guys and try to avoid that dead money hitting the cap, well, that's when their contract's void. So it's not like this major headline that ESPN's talking about, but as it pertains to the Ravens, it's the difference right there of $10 million in dead money hitting the cap, which is not insignificant. So, you know, it's kind of the next checkpoint in the offseason in terms of, do you get a deal done with Zeitler? Now, let's be clear with any of those guys I just mentioned, that Monday's deadline can pass and they can still re-sign them, but that dead money hit stays on the cap then. So it just, you know, it's basically potential dollars you can spend on your roster going down the drain.
Well,
so
the deadlines are what makes these things happen.
Exactly.
If Zeitler's serious about being here and they're serious and they're where they are, and if not, it'll just hit the market and it'll just be another guard, right? Like literally, right?
And then you see, and then maybe you get something done then, but the chances seem generally go down when that happens. So, but the point
is, this is the time to be checking everybody's Instagram. This is when they say goodbye to places, right? Like,
right.
They're the ones that announce it now.
Although he's not too. His wife is pretty active on Twitter, but he isn't. But you know, we'll see how it plays out. Again, for the Ravens, there's such a sense of, I don't think anyone is looking at this on paper in terms of how are you going to be better in the regular season. You know, it's kind of like what we talked about with the Orioles, talking about, well, how do you duplicate 101 wins? That's not really the objective. The objective is you got to get to the postseason. Everyone understands that. That's why the regular season's important through that lens.
Yeah, the objective is who's your 3 starters in October and how healthy are they at that moment.
But you look at where the Ravens are. I mean, okay, Lamar's a 2-time MVP. We know what that means in terms of a legacy that likely lands him in Canton, even if he doesn't win a Super Bowl. But in terms of the legacy itself and enhancing the legacy itself, it's all about January and February. And it's not just for him. It's everyone on this team at this point. I short of them going 17-0, and being in that conversation where the '07 Patriots were, and obviously the '72 Dolphins, I'm not sure what they could possibly do in the regular season that's going to have anyone saying anything but, okay, that's good. What about the playoffs? What about doing it in
That's
January? I
also
mean,
can be said for the offseason, Luke. That was my point.
sure,
My point is
sure.
there's
It's
nothing they're
tough.
going to
Yeah.
do. They sign Zeitler, they don't sign Zeitler.
Right.
They Van Noy, they bad, but they draft a guy at 30. You draft a guy.
Yeah.
We hope he can play. And we'll
It's
see. And
tough.
then and by August when they're out running around and like playing football, the Orioles better be 81 and 58 and, headed
You hope
toward
so.
wherever, right. I mean, headed toward wherever you think they're going to be headed, that the Orioles are going to have all of this daily grind and the
Mhm.
Ravens aren't going to have a pop tart. They're just, unless something awful happens, they're not going to do anything amazing to make anybody say, well, they're going to get through the championship game next year. And I think that that's a different temperature. And dude, I'm stating the obvious here. I mean, it's the
Yeah.
gorilla in the room, right? Peter Angelos isn't going to own the baseball team. So all my focus isn't on whether Chad Steele's still Chad Steele or whether John's still, coach for life, or whether Lamar drove too fast on the highway or played street ball with a bunch of kids at a charity thing, like whatever. There's going to be like games every day and pitching and this and that, but there's going to be this thing with the baseball team where the really interested observers like you and me are going to say this is their chance to grow. And
Yeah.
what are they going to do to make sure their stadium's not empty the way the Terps are empty, or where the Ravens were 13-4 and had the greatest team of their generation, and there were 7 games where tickets were $10 on game day, home games. So how is the baseball team going to capture the imagination of more than white suburban folks in our community? And how are they going to change 30 years of just the worst brand I could imagine? You know what I mean? Like it's such an awfully tattered brand, but 101 wins, Jim Palmer still on in your living room every night. We still have a hat somewhere. We want to grasp onto something. All the knee people with the Wembley and I don't love the Ravens anymore. All the, hey, Terps don't do it for me anymore. Boy, the Orioles have a lane here in more than just nerds like you that love baseball and stats and like that. I'm talking about where we say, oh, the girls have a crush on the players and there's pink jerseys and there's a mob scene downtown every night and my Nest thing and Fadley's are packed. And it's back to not maybe where it was in the 90s where half of DC comes up here and whatever, but it feels like there's a big change about to happen with baseball here. And football, I don't know that they're prepared for that over there or that they care, but I think that we're going to wind up talking a whole lot more baseball because the world here is going to talk a lot more baseball. And I think that that's going to give them a chance to go heel, right? Yeah. I mean, they don't want to be out peacocking about the steamer they left down there and how they didn't run the ball. And we haven't talked about all that because it's so last month, but it's all John thinks about when he's out at dinner in March and April and runs into fans. It's all he could talk about to me when the last time I was in his company was, the failure at the end of the season and how it eats him up and like all of that. They're going to have some downtime, I mean, and that's not bad for them, but they're going to be a diminished football team in perception until such point that they go out on the field and they're 5-1 or whatever. And we're like, oh, they're just as good as they were last year. Because I think it's going to be hard to be as good as they were last year. And so do you.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean they won't be a playoff team. That doesn't mean they won't win the AFC North. That doesn't mean that they won't be there next year in the AFC Championship game. But yeah, when you look at the kind of season that they had, it's difficult to duplicate that. They stayed relatively healthy, save for a couple guys, which we've certainly seen in recent history that's not always the case. But you made the point about a quiet offseason. I think they need that. I think that could actually be something that could be used to their benefit. I mean, you think about the last couple of years, you mentioned it already, talking about Lamar's contract and Lamar's contract and Lamar's contract, and then Lamar's contract some more. I mean, just that talking point not being there alone should be beneficial to everyone, just because it's not this dark cloud hanging over the organization's head in that way.
Well, whatever the Zay Flowers thing was last week and whatever becomes of that, like,
yeah,
that's
That's what you don't
that's a
want.
record. That's a game record for the offseason.
Exactly.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the only headline they're going to get is that kind of headline, because they're not going to make any other
I mean,
football headline that's going to be of that significance.
I mean, maybe a Justin Madubuike contract extension. You know what I mean? But even that's like, okay, that's exciting for a day, but is everyone talking
It's
about
not
that
an
for 3
addition.
weeks?
That just keeps us as good as we were.
Right. Well, but the point is, but that's a big part of what they're going to have to do. I mean, for them to be as good as they were last year this past year in the regular season, it's going to be internal. It's going to be holding on to as many of your guys as you can. It's going to be young guys improving, and the draft, right? I mean, it's the lifeblood for this organization. And yeah, come late April, people will be jazzed up about the draft. There's no.
When are we getting the sandwich picks, Luke? That's all I need to know.
Right, exactly. Well, and based on this offseason we're about to embark on, they'll have some. They're going to have some comp picks next offseason because they're going to lose some guys. I mean, there's no question about it. So, but this isn't uncharted territory for them in that way. That the good teams, the teams that are in the position that the Ravens have been in, at least on a regular season basis, you have attrition. I mean, the system's set up that way, right? I mean, they're in a position where they're going to have to create some cap space, and they're going to lose some guys, and they're going to have to restructure some guys. And even someone like a Ronnie Stanley may not even be here come the fall, depending on how they decide to approach that deal. So, it's part of it. And to your point, they're probably not going to make many splashy headlines. And I think, again, on the heels of 2 years of Lamar Jackson contract saga, it's probably not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, let somebody else deal with that.
Yeah, let someone else talk about that breathlessly, which I will not miss.
By the way, who's going to be the drama team this offseason? I'm trying to figure this out. Like, it was all Jets and Aaron Rodgers. I'm just like, who? But and by the way, I checked out when the NFL owners meetings are down in Orlando and spring training, and I put dates in. I didn't realize the draft's in Detroit this year, the draft's in Detroit this year. So I threw that into the calendar, and I thought, well, it's the end of April. The Orioles will be, I don't know, 14-6 by then or something like that.
Dude,
I'm just trying to have fun here. I'm playing it out. I haven't been able to talk about what the Orioles are going to be on draft day, like never or ever. And certainly not the thought that they're going to be under new ownership by the time Justin Tucker puts his foot on the football and kicks it in September. So
yeah,
I am breathing deeply, taking it all in, trying to get healthy so I can live long enough to be there next to you at the parade, in the press box, maybe, with a clubhouse badge, not sitting at the kids' table. But nonetheless, I mean, I am at 55 and having done this for 32 years now and 40 years of journalism behind me. I see this year as just an incredible year to be alive here for the city and for improvement, for all the stuff I talk about Baltimore positive. Dude, I'm going to CFG Bank Arena to see Journey this week, right? Like, there's the Harbor's going to be something. We're all going to fight about it, but they're going to build something down there. And the baseball and football team are getting a whole bunch of money and trying to lift the city in whatever way they can, So I'm interested in the baseball team, everything about how this local guy is going to bring Bloomberg and Cal Ripken and $1.8 billion. And we're never going to talk about John Boy again. And whatever incompetence that they show from that day forward will be on them. And I'm looking for a blank screen and a fresh canvas for me, for the fan base, for everybody that's had a bad run-in with the Angelos family or Masson, or you can't get their games, or the ticket prices, or the hot dogs were cold, or just any of it. I'm looking for it to really lift the city. And I'm going to be talking a lot about that, much more so than you could talk about who the number 3 and 4 starters are, and I will too. But I'm going to be paying attention to the bigger picture of, what this means for Wes Moore, what this means for Brandon Scott, what it means for the election, what it means for the stadium with the new ownership, and what they're really planning for a hotel that's in receivership and just that area. Because if smart people came in and they take this baseball thing that you love and your mother loves and your sister loves and your niece is going to love, and they do something really cool with it, it can be so much more effective than a football team in 8 games and some tailgates for the city, for what it can be. I live downtown for 20 years. I know what it can mean when big series happen and when people love the team and they feel aligned with the team. and the team as a love mark. It's loved and respected. Not, I used to love it, I used to respect it, but they've been shitting on me for 30 years. You know what I mean? Like that's going to go away, and that's going to be something that they really should be focused on, is on how to get everyone to not love it in spite of the owner or in spite of its warts or in spite, but to love it. And they have a chance. They have a chance with me. They have a chance with everybody. And for that, this was a football segment, but
Mhm.
I do think once baseball starts and plays every night, they're going to have a real opportunity here to snooker lots of folks in a way that the football team will not have that opportunity until the baseball team has already won your heart by the end of the summer to some degree. And then the football team can go play. But to your point, they're not going
Yeah.
to play a game that matters till next January. Like that's how the competition of these two teams. We talked about Boston years ago where they were all really good and they kind of
Mhm.
had to make headline. I don't feel like they're looking to get the Baltimore Suns headlines or care what you and I talk about every day, but I do think they care about money, and I think they care about the perception of where their brand is and where it's going. And there's about to become a healthy competition here with a new baseball owner that might not behave like Chad Steele or Greg Bader, or and he's got Cal Ripken out in front of it. Maybe the whole thing will behave like Cal Ripken and be really professional and really cool and really local and really awesome. And maybe people will be nice. And I know I talked a lot about that. And I think the baseball focus for me the next 5 or 6 months is really going to take a lot of whatever off the Ravens and whatever off their number 30 draft pick and whatever off the expectation of the fan base. Yeah, we want them to win the Super Bowl next year,
Mhm.
but I don't think anybody really thinks they're going to be a better team next year. That might go well in December, January, and we'll get into it. But I think the baseball team's going to have full attention for the first time certainly since I've owned WNSD, and it's been 25 years. And I think for that, I don't even know what to make of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll be full attention because again, the NFL is just so wildly popular, and I think that's the case in Baltimore, just like it is in any other market. But I definitely think the share, right? The share of attention, the distribution of attention can definitely change. And by the way, I think it started last year, even in spite of John Angelos, because the team was as good as they are. But now, when you talk about what's going on behind the scenes and how that can augment and fortify what they're already starting to do on the field, yeah, it's something that
But
you'd
the
like
night
to
that
think has.
Lamar throws out the first pitch in May or June, when it's a Friday night and they're giving away
Yeah,
something and they're in first place, and
I
there's
mean, that'd be
it's
awesome.
full when it's
Yeah,
full and Lamar, like they haven't had moments like that. I mean,
yeah.
and it's up to the community to make that happen. And but there was always but I wouldn't give money to these creeps that own the team.
Hmm.
And it would always came to that for me, right? And a lot of
Sure.
people didn't give money to the creeps that own those, and me being one of them, right? I'm not going to feel that way about the new, like I'm just not. I'm going to be more like, show up, see how they are, see what's going on. I know the team's good, dude. I know the team's good.
Hmm.
I don't know if the price point's right. I don't know if the value's right. I don't know what the press conferences are going to look like. I don't know what the television broadcasts are going to like all of that remains to be seen. But man, there's such a focus on it because you couldn't take your eyes off the train wreck of the last 30 years because they didn't do much right at all. And the football team, they're going to manage what they manage in the offseason. I mean, and really one of the things they have going on is building a new stadium, right? Like even my
Hmm.
lottery friends, for the big giveaway that they had from the Ravens tickets, the inside of the stadium's a mess. I was down there the other day. It's a construction zone. So they're really racing to get whatever they're going to get done as quickly as they can for when they open the football stadium back up, because they're not having Beyonce come down there and shake it this year because they're in a construction mode right now.
No question. I mean, that's got to be ready by what, the second week of August or end of July, whatever it is. So, but yeah, I mean, I just think, and you and I talked about this a little bit when we were at Coco's a couple weeks ago. I just think the potential, when you start thinking about upside, right? I mean, you always think about that in terms of like a young player or something like that, but you look at the Orioles having the upside that they've had on the field for a couple years now, but there was always the caveat of, okay, well, what about ownership? What about when it comes to time to pay some of these young guys? What about when it comes to increasing payroll and augmenting with free agents? And that's all just the baseball side. To your point, the business side and
Decision
understanding that,
making. Who's making
yes,
that decision?
this renovation for Oriole Park at Camden Yards to bring a vibrance to a 30-plus-year-old ballpark that gives it another 30 years of people being proud and wanting to go downtown and wanting to be at the ballpark and adjusting, whatever adjustments are going to be made in terms of, I'm guessing, seating capacity and where you're putting a bar or a restaurant or where you're moving this or that with suites and all that, but still maintaining the charm that Camden Yards has had for 30 years. Like we've talked about it a lot, the TV network, MASN. And by the way, that's not just the Orioles, that's all of baseball figuring out these issues right now. And many issues that the NFL is figuring out to varying degrees, that the Ravens are figuring out that they didn't have to deal with 20 years ago. But there is a vibrance, there's an enthusiasm, there's an excitement about the potential of what this could become, and not just being like, oh, all the oxygens for the Ravens or all the oxygens for the Orioles. It could be that people are really excited about both teams year round.
But it couldn't have been like that without the basebalt team being sold, to your point. It couldn't have.
Yeah, exactly.
You couldn't have unbridled enthusiasm.
There was a ceiling. There was a ceiling. Yes. And the way that, look, Buck Showalter and Dan Duquette, those were some really fun years. It was fleeting. It felt like it was like this happy accident that happened, but it was fun. But there was always a sense of, I don't know. I mean, are they going to be able to sustain this? And certainly we saw that they couldn't. But now there's endless possibilities in terms of what this could become. I've said it to you. Doesn't mean that, they're going to have a $300 million payroll. That's only, that's part of the equation. But for me, it's, can you build something that isn't just really good right now, but it can be 3 years from now and a decade from now, you can say, all right, they might have a lean year or two here or there. I mean, that happens. It's sports. But in terms of thinking about the next 20 years, or how about the next 30 years in comparison to looking back at the last 30 years where it was mostly lousy, thinking the next 30 years could be mostly good to great if you run it well and you make good decisions and you have good people and you have ownership that wants to make it great and isn't just worried about turning a profit with the value of a franchise. So yeah, there's a lot of excitement on that front. And, so much of it's on the field. I'll continue to say that, but it goes beyond that. And now you're in a position with this new group coming in. And let's be very clear. We don't know how it's going to go. No one knows that for sure, but we know how the last 30 years have gone. And just the unknown there and the potential there and the upside there, boy, that's really, really exciting. I mean, that's why I said up until the Bradish thing, on Thursday when pitchers and catchers started working out, I said, I don't think there's been a year where Orioles fans have been this excited for the start of spring training. To me, I go back to 96 where, okay, we didn't, at that point, it was still new with Angelos and like not knowing how exactly that was going to go, but they hired Pat Gillick. They hired Davey Johnson. They were spending money on all-stars like Roberto Alomar. And, the payroll, all that. To me, you have to go back to that point in time, and we're talking almost 30 years there for the excitement level being where it is for the Orioles right now. So I know we're talking about baseball now, and we started talking about the Ravens. The Ravens, it's been built in for a long time, assuming they're going to be good and trusting that they're going to make more good decisions than bad. And they're certainly going to be good. They're way more likely to be good than bad. I mean, they've built that up over close to a quarter century now, to their credit. Regardless of whether they're perfect or not, or it's been 12 years since they've made it to a Super Bowl, the Orioles are chasing anything close to that, and now it finally looks like they have a chance that they could build something like that, where it's not just good in 2023 like it was last year or 2024, but it could be good in the years to come and really good in the years to come. And to maintain that in the way that the Ravens have, just the possibility of being able to think that way and imagine it being that way, that's really exciting, understanding that, yeah, they've got a lot to figure out in the way that professional sports in 2024 has a lot to figure out. We're seeing that with these streaming deals left and right with sports and rights fees and all that, how that's all going to pan out. We don't know for sure, but it's a lot more exciting around here on the baseball front than it's been. And like I said, you have to go back almost 3 decades for me to find that before, like I said, the Kyle Bradish thing, but even so, people are still really, really excited.
Remember, I got excited running into Deepak Chopra on the streets up in New York a couple years ago. He has a little tournament because you're not doing anything this week. You can study this pure potentiality. Pure
Yeah.
potentiality. There you go. So there's give you a little Deepak here. Luke is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on the Instagram and the X's and the Twitters and the threads and the Facebooks, and I'm out on the LinkedIn's. We're going to be doing some continuing crab cake roast stuff this week, as well as sort of adding to the collection. I'm so excited to have Rick Emmett from Triumph coming on this week. So I'm adding some rock stars around here, as well as some football and baseball related stuff here. People I didn't get to, some people I wanted to have on before the Super Bowl or in the season, some people I've been waiting on the baseball side to have on, and I don't want to wait till we get into the middle of the season. So next couple weeks, it's going to be a hodgepodge of things here. We're going to get the Maryland Crab Cake Tour back out on the road. I'll be giving away the 10 times the cash tickets, but I wore myself out with the Crab Cake Row and the Cup of Super Bowl. So it is February. I'm usually like on the beach somewhere around this time, take a little downtime after a Super Bowl to ramp up for a spring training thing. But we're here. We're working hard. And we appreciate everybody making it happen, subscribing to our YouTube, subscribing to all sorts of stuff. And our tech service still alive and well as well. So any breaking news will happen there. And our friends at Curio Wellness and Foreign Daughter for giving me a really cool I'm a Blunt Person shirt. So it started with Lefty Giselle, it went through Ravens this, and ended with pure potentiality of the baseball team and life beyond Kyle Bradish. I am Nestor. He is Luke. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Back on the beat, talking sports, even when there ain't none right now, but there will be soon. Pitchers and catchers are in. This time next week, they'll be playing fake baseball.